The parking lot at Kroger was half empty that Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had parked near the cart return the way I always do since my knee started giving me trouble, and the October wind was coming off the field behind the strip mall in cold, flat gusts. I had my list: milk, bread, the low sodium soup my doctor keeps pushing, and some of those little mandarin oranges my granddaughter likes when she visits. Simple things. The kind of errands that fill up a Tuesday when you are 67 years old and living alone. I was loading my bags into the trunk when I heard someone behind me. "Excuse me, Mom." I turned around. A woman, maybe 50, wearing a dark green coat and holding a coffee cup from the Dunkin' across the street. I'd never seen her before in my life. She had tired eyes, the kind that come from carrying something heavy for a long time. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I know this is strange," she said, "but I need you to read this before you go home today." She held out a folded piece of paper. Not an envelope. Just a piece of paper, folded twice like something torn from a notepad. I stared at it. "Who are you?" I asked. She shook her head slightly. "Please, just read it." And then she walked away. She got into a grey sedan parked 2 rows over and drove out before I could say another word. I stood there in the wind, holding that piece of paper for a long moment before I put it in my coat pocket and got in my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes without starting the engine. The paper was folded in my hand. I almost opened it right there. But something stopped me, some old reflex from a life spent learning to be careful. I set it on the passenger seat and drove home. My name is Naomi. I live in a house in Decatur, Georgia, that my late husband Clifford and I bought in 1989. 3 bedrooms, a covered porch, a big oak tree in the backyard that has outlasted 2 roof replacements and one bad ice storm. Clifford passed 4 years ago, a Thursday in February, while I was downstairs making breakfast and he was still in bed. Massive stroke. The paramedics said he was gone before I even heard anything. We had one daughter, Pauline. She was 41 that year, already married with 2 kids of her own, living about 20 minutes away in Stone Mountain. I want to be careful about how I describe what my life was like with Pauline after Clifford died, because the truth is complicated the way family always is, and I spent a long time making excuses for things I should not have excused. Clifford left a will. He was organized that way, always had been. The house was left to me outright. His 401k, roughly $230,000 at the time of his death, was split between me and Pauline, 70% to me, 30 to her. There was also a whole life insurance policy, the $300,000. I was the primary beneficiary on that. Pauline got her inheritance share within a few months. I handled the insurance claim myself. The money went into an account at my credit union, and I kept living the same quiet way I had been living. I did not touch most of it. Clifford always said to leave the money alone unless something serious came up. I had my Social Security, a small pension from the school district where I worked as an administrative assistant for 22 years, and the house was paid off. I did not need to touch it. But Pauline knew the numbers. She had been there when Clifford's attorney read the will. I should have paid more attention to when she started being so helpful. It started small, the way things always do. She began coming over more often, bringing food, offering to drive me to appointments, fixing little things around the house. I was grateful. I told myself this was grief doing something good for once, pulling us closer. I told myself my daughter had grown up. Her husband, a man I will call her husband because calling him by his name gives me a headache, was charming in the particular way of men who want something. He started joining her on visits. He would sit at my kitchen table and talk about investments, about the market, about how people lose money every year just by leaving it in a regular savings account. I listened. I am not a foolish woman, but I am also a woman who was raised to be polite, and there is a cost to that. Then one evening in March, about 14 months after Clifford passed, Pauline sat across from me at that same kitchen table and said she and her husband had been talking. "We think you should consider consolidating your assets, Mum," she said. "The insurance payout, the 401k distributions, you're not doing anything with it." "I'm doing plenty with it," I said. "I'm leaving it alone." She laughed a little. "You're losing ground to inflation." Her husband pulled out a folder. He had brought a folder to my kitchen. He started talking about a financial advisor they had found, a man whose name I do not remember now, who could help me restructure things. I told them I would think about it. I did not call the financial advisor. I thought the conversation was over. It was not over. By summer, something had shifted and I could feel it, but I could not name it. Pauline's calls had a different texture. She asked questions that felt like inventory checks. How was my knee? Had I thought any more about getting a first-floor bedroom set up? Did I know that older homes in Decatur had appreciated significantly? She brought up a continuing care community in Gwinnett County 3 separate times in 2 months. Each time she described it differently. Once it was just a nice option to know about. Once it was a lot of your friends from church are thinking about it. Once it was you don't want to be a burden on anyone, Mum. That last one I remembered. That one sat in my chest for days. I want to tell you something about being a woman over 60 and hearing the word burden from your own child. It does not just sting, it reorganizes something. It makes you start looking at your own life from the outside, through their eyes, and suddenly everything you thought was fine starts to look like a problem that needs to be managed. I started wondering if maybe the house was too much, if maybe they were right. I called my friend Dottie, who I have known since our children were in elementary school together, and I told her what Pauline had been saying. Dottie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Naomi, who benefits if you move out of that house? I did not answer right away. You think about that, Dottie said. I thought about it. The piece of paper was still in my coat pocket when I got home from Kroger. I set my groceries on the counter and stood in my kitchen in my coat and took it out. I unfolded it slowly. It was handwritten, blue ink, small letters, careful and even. The financial advisor they want you to use is not independent. He works with your son-in-law. The paperwork you will be asked to sign includes a durable power of attorney. Read everything before you sign anything. Do not tell Pauline you received this. That was all. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, still in my coat, and I put the paper flat on the table in front of me, and I stared at it for a very long time. My first thought was that it was not real, that someone had made a mistake, had confused me with someone else. My second thought was that it was real, and I had been very, very stupid. The durable power of attorney. I knew what that was. Clifford's attorney had explained it to us years ago when we were doing our own estate planning. A durable power of attorney gives someone the legal authority to manage your finances and make decisions on your behalf. It does not expire if you become incapacitated. In the wrong hands, it is nearly unlimited. Pauline had mentioned, twice in passing, that it might be smart for me to have one set up, just in case. I had thought she meant for my protection. I did not sleep much that night. I got up at 5 in the morning and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the dark with my reading glasses and a notepad, and I started writing down everything I could remember from the past year and a half. Every conversation, every comment about the house, the money, the assisted living facility, the folder her husband had brought, the financial advisor's name that I had not written down but now wished desperately I had. By 7 o'clock I had 3 pages of notes. I called Dottie at 8. I need a lawyer, I said. Not a financial advisor. A lawyer. Dottie did not ask why. She said, I'll call you back in 20 minutes. She called back in 15. She had a name. An elder law attorney in Decatur. A woman named Patricia something, who Dottie's cousin had used when she was dealing with her own family situation. I wrote the name and number down. I called that morning and made an appointment for that Thursday. I did not tell Pauline about the appointment. I kept my voice normal when she called that week. I said yes when she asked if I was feeling okay. I said maybe when she brought up a dinner at her house that weekend. I was calm the way you learn to be calm when you have spent 30 years managing school administrators who did not want to hear bad news. The attorney, whose full name was Patricia Osei-Bonso, was a small woman with natural hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain and an office that smelled like good coffee. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. Had I signed anything? No. Had I given anyone access to my accounts? No. Did I have the piece of paper? Yes, I had brought it. She looked at the note for a long time. Do you know who wrote this? She asked. No, I said. She nodded slowly. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. She explained that the first step was protective. She wanted to review all of my existing accounts, the credit union, the 401k, rollover, the insurance payout, and make sure there was nothing already in place that I did not know about. She also wanted to pull a copy of my credit report. She had seen cases, she said, where family members opened accounts or lines of credit in a parent's name before the parent even knew anything was happening. I had not considered that. She also explained what a durable power of attorney actually allows. Everything I had feared and more. If you had signed that document with this financial advisor, she said, and if the advisor had a relationship with your son in law, they would have had the legal authority to move your money, sell your home, and make financial decisions on your behalf. And depending on how the document was drafted, you might not have known until it was too late to reverse. I thought about the word burden. I thought about all those conversations at my kitchen table. My daughter, I said, and then I stopped. Patricia Osebonsu looked at me without pity, which I appreciated. Yes, she said, I know. Over the next 2 weeks, she found several things. Her husband had approached the financial advisor first. There were email records between them, which the attorney was able to obtain through a process I did not fully understand at the time. The advisor had been prepared to present me with a full reallocation plan that included consolidating my accounts under a new joint management structure. The power of attorney document had already been drafted. Pauline's name was listed as agent. There was also an inquiry on my credit report from a mortgage company, submitted 3 months earlier. Not in my name exactly, but using my social security number. The attorney said this was something we needed to report to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and potentially to law enforcement. I sat in her office and looked at the wall behind her head for a moment. My own daughter, I said. I'm sorry, Patricia said. I did not cry then. I cried later, in the parking lot, sitting in my car for a long time before I started the engine. I cried for Clifford, who trusted me to take care of what we had built together. I cried for the woman I had been a year ago who thought her daughter was just being attentive. And then I stopped crying and I drove home and I made dinner and I ate it at my kitchen table alone and I decided I was going to be all right. Pauline called on a Friday evening to tell me the dinner was that Sunday at 2 o'clock. She said her husband was making his ribs. I won't be able to make it, I said. Silence. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine, I said. I have something else that day. Another silence, a different quality to it. Is everything okay? She asked. Her voice had shifted slightly. Not concern. Calculation. Everything's fine, I said. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. On Monday, I met again with Patricia. On Tuesday, we filed a report with the Georgia Consumer Protection Division and a separate report with the Credit Bureau. On Wednesday, Patricia sent a formal cease and desist letter to the financial advisor and a letter to Pauline's husband through his employer, which I later learned caused a significant amount of trouble for him at work. On Thursday, Pauline came to my house unannounced. I saw her car from the kitchen window before she knocked. I had known she would come. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. She looked different. I do not know exactly how to describe it. Like something had slipped, like the face she had been wearing for the past year and a half was not sitting quite right anymore. Can I come in? She asked. No, I said. She blinked. In 67 years, I do not think I'd ever said that word to my daughter while standing in my own doorway. Mom, I know what you and your husband were planning, I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced staying steady. I know about the financial advisor. I know about the power of attorney that was already written up with my name on it. I know about the credit inquiry. Her face went through several things. Denial first, the reflexive kind, then something harder, then something that might have been shame, though I am still not entirely sure. It wasn't like that, she said. Then tell me what it was like. She could not. She stood on my porch and she could not tell me what it was like because there was no version of the story that did not involve her deciding that what I had worked for my entire life was hers to take. I want you to go home, I said. I have an attorney now. All communication between us needs to go through her office. I will share her contact information with you. Mom, please. Pauline, I said it quietly. Go home. She left. I closed the door and stood in my front hallway and listened to her car back out of the driveway. Then I went to the kitchen and made tea and called Dottie and told her everything. In the months that followed, Patricia helped me do several things. I updated my will and made sure it was airtight. I changed the beneficiary designations on all of my accounts, something I should have done properly years ago. I set up a trust structure that made it significantly harder for anyone to challenge or contest the disposition of my assets. Without a legal fight, they were unlikely to win. I also had the credit inquiry investigated. Law enforcement became involved. And I will not describe every detail of what followed, but I will say that Pauline's husband lost his job, and there are consequences that are still working themselves out through the legal system as I sit here telling you this. Pauline and I have not spoken properly since that Thursday on my porch. She sent a letter through an attorney saying she had not fully understood what her husband was doing. I do not know if that is true. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of what she claims and what I suspect. And I have decided that I do not need to resolve that question in order to continue living my life. My granddaughter still comes and visits. She is 9 years old and she loves those mandarin oranges. And she calls me Grandma Naomi and she does not know any of this. I intend to keep it that way for as long as I can. I still do not know who wrote the note. I have thought about it many times. The woman in the dark green coat with the tired eyes. She knew enough about the plan to describe the power of attorney. She knew who I was, knew my car, knew I shopped at that Kroger. She walked away before I could ask anything. Patricia suggested that she may have been connected to the financial advisor's office, someone with a conscience who did not want to be part of what was happening, someone who could not confront it directly but could not do nothing either. I think about that sometimes, about what it costs a person to do the right thing in a small, anonymous way, and then walk away without knowing how it turns out. She has no idea that her two-sentence note on a piece of notepad paper changed everything. She has no idea that I'm still in this house, still sitting at this kitchen table, still drinking coffee every morning in the kitchen that Clifford and I chose together 35 years ago. If she ever hears this, I want her to know, you saved me, and I never even learned your name. I want to say one more thing before I finish, and I want to say it plainly. If you are older and you have money saved from a life of work, and the people around you have started being very helpful in ways that feel like they have an agenda, pay attention to that feeling. It is not paranoia. It is experience. You did not get to 60 or 70 or 80 years old without learning to read a room. Get an attorney who specializes in elder law, not a general practice attorney, not a family friend who passed the bar 20 years ago, an elder law specialist. They have seen these situations. They know the documents to look for and the questions to ask and the systems that protect you when the people who should be protecting you are the exact people you need protecting from. Update your beneficiary designations. Check your credit report. Know what a power of attorney actually says before you sign it. Know that there is a difference between a springing power of attorney, which only activates under certain conditions, and a durable one, which is active immediately and continuously. These are not dark things to think about. They are practical things. Clifford would have called them responsible. The oak tree in my backyard is still there. We planted it the year Pauline was born. A little sapling in a burlap sack that we drove home in the back of our first car together. It is probably 40 feet tall now. It does not know about any of this. It just keeps growing. I like that about that tree. I have spent a lot of time thinking about what made all of this possible. Not just the betrayal, that part is painful, but it is not complicated. People who want something and believe they are entitled to it will find ways to justify what they do. That is not new. What I keep turning over in my mind is the other side of it. What made it possible for me to survive it? I think it starts with paying attention, not the anxious kind, where you are looking for threats behind every door. Just the quiet, steady kind of attention that comes from knowing your own life well enough to notice when something does not sit right. Pauline's shift happened slowly. The extra visits, the loaded questions, the word burden dropped like it was nothing. Any one of those things by itself might mean nothing, but I had lived long enough to know that when several small things all point in the same direction, you do not dismiss that. You sit with it. You ask Dottie. That is what I mean about wisdom. It is not something you find in a book or learn in a class. It is the accumulated weight of every hard thing you have ever paid attention to. Clifford used to say that experience only teaches you something if you're willing to be taught. I did not fully understand that when he said it, I understand it now. There is also something to be said about what it takes to act. I had the note. I had Dottie's voice in my ear asking the right question. But I still had to make the choice to call a lawyer instead of calling Pauline and asking her to explain herself. That second option would have been easier in the short term. It would have felt like keeping the peace. But I have learned that keeping the peace with someone who is planning to harm you is not peace at all. It is just delay. And delay, in a situation like mine, had a very specific cost attached to it. Naomi at 67 had to decide whether she was still the kind of woman who acts, or whether she had become the kind of woman who waits and hopes things resolve on their own. I chose to act. Patricia Osei-Bonsu helped me understand what my options were, but the choice was mine. No one can make that choice for you. That is the part nobody tells you about getting older. People assume you become more passive, more deferential, more willing to let others handle things. But I found the opposite. When you have lived long enough to understand what you actually stand to lose, you become more willing to fight for it, not less. And Pauline, I do not hate my daughter. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easier to tell this story if I did. Hatred is clean. What I actually feel is more complicated, grief mostly, and a kind of exhausted clarity. She made choices. Her husband made worse ones. The choices had consequences that worked themselves out through systems designed exactly for this purpose. That is not revenge. That is just the way cause and effect operates when you stop interfering with it. The woman in the green coat never knew how her note landed. She gave me one moment of information and walks away. I think about what that kind of courage requires. To do a good thing with no guarantee it matters, no applause, no follow-up. That is integrity in its quietest form. And I think the world runs on more of that than we ever acknowledge. I am still in this house. The oak tree is still growing. I made coffee this morning, the same way I always have. That is enough. That is everything.